I rented Top Gun, the original Top Gun, on Saturday Memorial Day weekend, and because I'd never seen it before. I'd never seen that movie before. It's one of a few movies, a handful of movies that are classics that I've never seen. And I sat there and I watched it. And after I got done watching it, I posted on Facebook, can someone please remind me why this movie was so popular? I thought it was garbage. I thought all the characters were shallow. I thought the love interest was just a prop. There was no point to Kelly McGillis's character as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I just thought it was one of the most surface level movies that's just populated with character types. You know, the macho quintessential 80s movies. And all of the aerial sequences, I couldn't tell who was what. It looked like they just got a lot of stock footage of fighter jets and they decided to make a film. I don't know. I just didn't get into it. And I think that if I had seen that film in 1986 originally, where something like that, I imagine, was so fresh and so unique that's why it was popular. It was the most profitable film, highest grossing film of 1986. I still think even in 1986, had I seen that, I would have hated it. But I decided to watch it so I could have some frame of reference to watch Top Gun Maverick. And I was thinking to myself, really, it's Top Gun Maverick. The first one didn't seem to have much substance. So I really think I could probably go into Top Gun Maverick without seeing the first one and be fine. Well, I'm glad to say that I did see the original before watching Maverick, because I gotta say, a lot of the emotional resonance from Top Gun Maverick came from some of the flashback sequences to the original film and seeing some of the original characters reprise their roles in this movie. It really made for a strong emotional reaction from me. And I hazard to guess that, now, for me, the flashback sequences that are in Top Gun Maverick were really unnecessary because I had just seen the movie the day before. I suspect if people had seen Top Gun, the original, and hadn't seen it in nearly 30 years, some of that may not have registered with them. Not sure. But I can tell you that Top Gun Maverick is an awesome movie. I mean, say what you will about Tom Cruise's private life. I've read some things about him that I find distasteful in his actions ever since he jumped on the couch and acted like a douche in front of Matt Lauer, who himself is a douche. Say what you will about Mr. Cruise, but damn, he puts everything into his movies. I gotta give him that. You know, I can't stand the concept of Scientology, but I guess it's working for him. This is a quintessential summer movie. If I were a teenager and I saw this movie, I'll probably be telling my parents, I want to be a Navy fighter pilot. The movie improves so much on the original. First of all, the characters. It seems like the main characters in this film now have, well, all the characters in this film, right off the bat, have a purpose. They set up a purpose that has high stakes in this movie right from the beginning. In the first film, I just felt like the only reason they were going to Top Gun school was to compete to see who is number one at the Top Gun school. That, to me, I just didn't feel was much of a motivation to get invested in those characters. And then maybe 15 minutes before the movie wraps up, that's when there's a mission that enters the plot. And the mission is really lightweight. We just get to see the jets flying through the air, indistinguishable who is the bad guys and who are the good guys. And then it just ends. The movie, it just didn't do anything for me. Here, right from the jump, they create a reason that Maverick has to train a new batch of young recruits. And by the way, I appreciated this new batch of recruits because it actually reflected what America looks like today as opposed to what America looked like in 1986. But they set up this extremely dangerous mission right off the bat, which is why Maverick has to come and train the new batch of recruits. And that's another thing this movie does very well. It does a good job of showing you that it's not all fun and glory. Flying those fighter jets is a very dangerous proposition, period. The other thing that worked well for me in this movie, far better than the original, was honestly Tom Cruise's age, or I should say, as well as Maverick's age. He seemed to have more gravitas in this film. He seemed to have more weight. He seemed to have a little bit more burden on him, which made him, to me, more interesting of a character, as opposed to the younger Tom Cruise / Maverick, who, watching that film, I know everything he does is pretty much gonna work out okay, including the death of his partner Goose, which is what happened in the first film. No spoiler there, I would hope. But given his experience, the lines in his face, the age, the wisdom that comes with that age, I don't know, it just seemed like the character was far more grounded in this film than in the first film. The movie sets up Maverick's experience through the last 30 years very well, with a beginning or opening sequence that is suspenseful right off the bat. It's a great sequence to start the film. Miles Teller appears as Rooster, the son of Goose from the original. And you would think that the writers are going to be lazy and make this a very simple redemption arc for Maverick's character, having to deal with Rooster and having to overcome the ghosts of the past. And that does take place in the movie, but they really do elevate it, partially because of the great performances of Miles Teller and Tom Cruise. So they managed to take something that could be a very simple story arc of redemption, but they really play it out through to the end. I'm not going to say what happens at the end with those two characters, but it is the centerpiece of the film. It is the part of the film that, had they not, well, I'm not going to give my rating just yet, but it's the part of the film that really makes this movie sing, if that's the appropriate term. One would think that just pairing Rooster and Maverick on the same squad would be enough of a potential conflict and create that redemption arc needed for Maverick. One would think that the pairing of those two would be enough. But for whatever reason, the writers make the interesting choice to insert another conflict in between Maverick and Rooster's character, a conflict that goes above and beyond the fact that Goose died under Maverick's watch. It was an interesting thing to do. I don't know that it was necessary, but it didn't mar the film. It just seemed like it was piling on where it didn't need to pile on. Jon Hamm appears in the film as Maverick's commanding officer at Top Gun, the Top Gun Academy. And he's probably the most stereotypical character of the lot. He's the guy who's like always trying to fuck over Maverick because he doesn't want Maverick to be there. He's always the guy. He's the guy that's like, damn it, Maverick, you'll do what I tell you to do. You don't have any choice. You follow my rules. He's that stereotypical character. But Jon Hamm plays him well. The secondary characters, the trainees, don't play as large a role in this film as they did in the original film. And that's simply because in the original film, the focus was on Maverick, who himself was a trainee. And again, I think that was one of the shortcomings of that film, because it worked so much better in this sequel that the focus is on Maverick, who is an instructor. So the trainees don't play as strong a role as they did in the first one, but they still are very well developed characters. I'll put it that way. There's one character, name is Hangman, and I guess he kind of plays the Iceman in this film. And I'm not going to say what happens with him. He doesn't have a lot of material to deal with other than being there for the exciting flying sequences like all the other trainees are. But he comes off, the actor plays him a little bit too smarmy, too smug, with not much dimension to start off with, I'll say. Whereas Iceman, Val Kilmer, in the original, he does come off as smug, but he's justified to a certain degree in his smugness. He's justified in telling Maverick, I don't want you flying with me because you're too dangerous. This guy, Hangman, he's kind of a dick. And I felt like the actor could have toned it back a little bit. There's another character that I really liked named Bob, and that's his call sign, Bob. And in a lesser film, Bob would have been the butt of jokes. He would have been the guy that people were spraying whipped cream on in the barracks, or putting soap in pillowcases and smacking them in the stomach in the barracks. They don't do that. They do a couple of jokes with Bob, and then they move on. And then after that, Bob is my dude in the film. Okay, so I do like the way they rounded out all of the characters, even though they didn't have a lot to contribute other than in the flying sequences. They were a nice crew of characters, and they were a diverse crew of characters, and there was at least one female in the trainee group in this film. There's a very, very emotional scene. Well, there are two emotional scenes with Val Kilmer as Iceman. Seeing him in this film, had I not seen the original, I wouldn't have teared up the way I did when they show Iceman in this movie. And part of the emotion is seeing Val Kilmer after what he went through in real life. I wasn't aware that Val Kilmer had throat cancer and can barely speak at this point. But seeing him, knowing that he went through that, that is, the actor went through that, and it was written into the character, and they brought him back. And to see where Iceman and Maverick started as combatants in the original film, and then to see this scene where they embrace, yeah, I'm like, okay, yeah, you got me. Let me turn my head away while I wipe away these tears. Very emotional scene. There's a second scene with Val Kilmer's character that I didn't see the need for. Didn't think it was necessary. I would have liked to have seen it go another way. So I questioned that, but again, it wasn't enough to mar the film for me. I'll tell you, there's one character that did not reprise the role that they had in the original film, and that's Kelly McGillis. I've heard a few reasons why she did not come back. One of them is pretty disgusting if it's true. That is that she's gotten a little, well, we're not even going to go there. But I thought in the first film that her character was totally just a prop, the love interest for the leading man. And I gotta say, they bring in Jennifer Connelly, who is an extremely talented actress, and her character doesn't add much more to this film. They do hint that Maverick, and I think her name was Penny, that they've had a relationship in the past, and Maverick did something to hurt her. I don't think I'm spoiling here. And they do suggest that this story plot line is about Maverick and Penny possibly doing something long term. But they don't really follow through on that. In other words, you could have excised Jennifer Connelly's entire screen presence, and I don't think it would have detracted from the movie whatsoever. And I think that's a shame, because Jennifer Connelly is a great actress, and she deserved more than to just be another prop love interest to the leading man, Tom Cruise. I think the writers do make an attempt to show some dimension to that relationship by, or at least to Jennifer Connelly's character, by giving her a daughter in the film. And for me, I thought, oh, was this going to be like a No Time to Die type of situation where this subplot is about Maverick actually having a daughter, and that's another redemption arc for him, which would have been kind of a lot. But no, that really goes nowhere. So I don't even see the need why they again introduced a female character who has very little to do. That was a little disappointing. But make no mistake, the highlights of this movie included all of the aerial photography. The cinematography in this movie is awesome. The dogfights in this movie are awesome. You want to know what made these dogfights awesome? Because in this film, I was able to determine who was who. I was able to see spatial planes and positions of each plane, or where this character was flying and this character was flying. It was much easier to see what the jets were doing in relation to what the pilots were saying. So in the first film, one of the pilots might say, I'm going to brake right. And then I just see a jet go straight, but he's heading to the right of the frame. Okay. In this film, a pilot says, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And you see the pilot do X, Y, and Z. Right? I don't know. The first one just felt like, again, just a lot of footage, and they tried to make it fit into what the pilots were saying as best they could. Here, the pilot said he was going to do something, or she said she was going to do something, and you saw them do it, and you saw them do it in relation to all the other fighter jets. So that made it so much more better than the original. Granted, I got to think that a lot of the jet sequences were CGI, but it's clear that there was a lot of practical photography in this film. As a matter of fact, at the showing that I went to, Tom Cruise, there was a little, like a 10-second or 15-second opening shot before the studio logo comes on, where Tom Cruise, who's out of makeup and no hair dye, and is starting to show his age. I was surprised. I was like, who is that guy? Oh shit, that's Tom Cruise. And he says that he says, I want you to enjoy this film. We did a lot of hard work with a lot of real fighter jets and a lot of professional fighter pilots. So please enjoy the film. So yeah, a lot of this stuff I know was real. I'm sure a lot of it was CGI. Whatever was the case, it was so much better. The sequences were so much better. And I told you earlier in this review, what made them better for me, not only because of the better photography and the technology to show us what is transpiring effectively, but because there was a mission they were training for. And the mission, I'll put it this way, the mission was basically Star Wars meets Mission Impossible, okay? If you saw the original Star Wars, and who hasn't, then you've seen some of the sequences in this movie. But it didn't matter. I mean, Star Wars was fantasy. Seeing it played out here in a more realistic narrative, it was just as gripping. There's a scene where Tom Cruise, as Maverick, goes through a sequence to prove that the sequence can be done. And man, the theater that I saw them, we were clapping and cheering. And then the stakes just go up even higher. They go on the mission, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it's straight out of that trench run in Star Wars, okay? But they go on a mission, and the tension just builds and builds and builds and builds. And it comes down to Maverick and Rooster, who are part of the larger team, and you see that redemption play out. And it is just a beautiful thing, man. It was another teary-eyed moment, okay? I don't believe I spoiled anything there, but the third act of this film, the third act alone makes this film worth 4 wheels out of 5. Yes, I'm giving this movie 4 wheels. That's the second movie in as many months as I've given 4 wheels to. And the first one was Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. Maybe I'm growing more sympathetic in my old age, or soft in my old age, but yeah, man, this movie really kicks into high gear. And it's funny because the beginning of the movie, it starts off pretty much note for note how the first movie started off. And I thought, here, just like when I went to see Transformers 2, or I don't know, any other sequel to a movie that I hated, and I thought, well, maybe the sequel will be better, because that happened with me in Star Trek 2: The Wrath of Khan. I hated the first one. I went to see the sequel, fell in love with the whole franchise. So I figured, let me go see it again. And when they started this movie with the same beats as the first movie, I was like, I got suckered again. But pretty much right after that sequence, which is, I think they lifted it note for note, and maybe actually used some of the same footage, I don't know, from the first movie. But yeah, the movie does establish itself as a great sequel, and that third act makes it worth the price of admission alone. Go see this movie. I think it might be the summer film to beat, and that includes Doctor Strange as well. So, all right, guys, that's the martini. Go see this movie. Take care.